Ashley here with HeartHookHome.com, and today we are going to learn how to add beads to your crochet projects. This is a brand new purse pattern that I have, and I absolutely love the way that the beading turned out on this. So we're going to discuss the three main ways of adding or incorporating beads into your crochet. I've gone ahead and worked up this full-size purse with lots of beads down here, some beads here, and then more sparse beads up top. I've gone ahead and lined it and added the pocket and added the zipper, and it's absolutely fabulous. So find this pattern on HeartHookHome.com. It's a free one. I do have this matching coin purse size that I am working up in this video today. I have just run out of beads, which I did on purpose because I want to string new beads with you to show you how to do that in my preferred method. Before we do that though, I want to show you the other two ways that you can add or incorporate beads into your crochet, and then I'll show you how I do it this way, which is my absolute favorite. The first way that I discuss in my tutorial for adding beads to crochet is with a regular sewing needle and thread. The most important thing when adding the beads with a sewing needle and thread is to find your thread color that matches as close as possible to your yarn color. You don't want to match your thread to the beads, you want to match it to your actual yarn so that it's not as visible when you go to sew in the thread, right? One of the ways or one of the reasons that you would want to use the sewing needle is either if you're not quite sure where you want to place those beads, you can go ahead and crochet the whole project and then add them on at the end. Or if the beads that you're using have such a tiny hole that your yarn won't fit through them or you can't get the yarn to go through, this is an option to sewing them on at the end, right? So that is something to explore if you are unsure of where to add the beads. This is also something that you could do with a project that you already have. The next option that I discuss in my beading tutorial is adding beads with a tiny crochet hook. So I've gone ahead and added some here. This is just a tiny little swatch. This is not my preferred method, but it does work well. Now, a few times that you would want to use this method is if you've got a yarn or a very thin thread that is delicate and it could break easily, and you don't want to load all of the beads onto the strand because when the beads run back and forth, it could weaken your yarn or it could make it split, or just the friction alone of the beads traveling back and forth could damage your project. So adding these beads individually is also beneficial if you don't need a lot of beads or if you're just adding them here or there. Now, the way that I like to add the beads is as I'm crocheting along with my regular crochet hook, what I'm going to also need is I'm going to need a tiny little steel hook. This is a 0.75 millimeter, so a little itty bitty baby hook, right? This is absolutely so tiny you can't even hardly see the little head of the hook here. So what I'm going to do is as I'm crocheting this next stitch, I'm going to pull up my loop like this so that it's nice and tall, right? I'm going to take my little canister of beads and I'm just going to pick one up here. This can be kind of tedious. So I picked one up on my little hook, right? Because there is no way that that bead is going to fit on my regular 4 millimeter hook. So I'm going to put this tiny hook inside of that loop. And now I'm just going to pull that yarn straight on through. And now when I've got that loop pulled back up and my bead is on the loop, then I'm going to reinsert my regular size hook, go into the next stitch, and just complete that stitch just like that. Right? And then maybe single crochet in the next. And if you want to do another bead, you'll pull it up. We'll grab one of our beads here. And this is also beneficial if you want to plan your colors and you don't want to pre-string them and have to worry about what color is coming next. So I'm going to put my tiny hook in here. I'm going to pull it through the bead. Oops. See? Sometimes you got to finagle it. And this yarn really isn't the best either. Pull that loop through, insert your regular size hook, and complete your stitch as normal. So that is how you would use the tiny hook just like that. And you can add these beads individually wherever you want. So this is beneficial if you're using a weak yarn, kind of like this one is kind of splitty a little bit, which is giving me issues when I go to pull it through. But you know, if you don't want to pre-string your yarn, or if you're not sure the color placement of how you're going to place your color layout, or if you're doing a kind of graph or something, this is an excellent way to add those beads to your crochet. It's just not my favorite method. Now, my favorite method is when you pre-string your beads. And so in order to do that, let me put my little cap back on this guy. This guy's so tiny, I mean, you could really stab somebody with that, which I do not recommend, just for the record. So now that I am ready to show you my favorite method of adding these beads, we are going to continue adding beads to this. When you pre-string your beads, there is a super cool tool that you can use. This is a string and bead. You literally just spin it and then you put down a curved needle and it'll just kind of pick up the beads as you go. This is not very expensive. I've linked to it in my tutorial on the blog. You just throw your beads in here. It sits on a peg, right? So it's kind of like a, I don't know, like a wheel axle, and you just spin this and pick up your beads. So in order to use your bead stringer, you need to have a big eye beading needle. And all that means is that when you open it up, it's open in the middle like this, so that you can fit your thread or whatever you're using in the middle of this. So what I'm going to do is I've got my yarn here. I'm using a crochet thread, which is actually Curio number 3, which is a crochet thread. It's a fine, it's a lovely, I love it. I love how shiny it is and how sturdy it is. So we're going to string all of our beads onto this. So this is the pre-string method. I'm just going to pull my yarn just a little bit so that it's not right up close to the eye here. So I've got a little bit of a tail. Now I am ready to string my beads. So here I have my beads that I picked out. This is the Magic Copper color, and I absolutely love these. These are size 6 seed beads, and they are the perfect size to fit onto the crochet thread here. So I'm just going to take off the lid, and I'm going to dump them into my little bead stringer. Okay, and now I've got this needle here, and it's curved so that it can pick up all of these little beads. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spin this, and I'm going to put my little needle down in here so that it picks up beads onto my needle, right? So then I'll take this and I'll just push it down onto my string, and that's it. Now I will say that the more full this is, the easier it is to work. So I'm going to continue stringing on. You kind of have to figure out the right angle to hold your needle at. Sometimes if you're holding it to where the tip of the needle isn't perfectly lined up with the holes of the beads, it won't work quite as well. So I'm just going to continue spinning. All right, now that I have as many beads as I want to string, you don't want to do too many so that it's so heavy, but usually I can fit an entire tube on there and it'll work out just fine, especially when using this number 3 Curio cotton. So now that I've strung as many beads as I need, I'm going to move this out of the way, and let's pick up my project. So you will, depending on the size of the project, you will reach a point where you have to string more beads on, which means that you will have to clip your yarn and then take that new yarn, right, the new piece, and use that to string all of your new beads on and then continue on crocheting. So when I do that, I like to leave a long enough tail so that I can very thoroughly weave in that end, and I like to crochet over it back and forth as I create these rows. So let's figure out, or let's learn how to add these beads. So for this pattern, I am adding a bead every other stitch, and this is all single crochet. So bead, no bead, bead, no bead, bead, no bead, bead, no bead, and then a bead on the next one. So let me pull that stitch out so that I can add my new yarn. So I'm just going to add this section where we just added all these beads. I'm going to make sure that I leave a super long tail so that I can crochet around it and then weave it in really well. So I've added that. Let me tie a knot so that it's not going anywhere. Okay, so now I've got these these two super long tails. I'm going to crochet around those. So now that I have a stitch without a bead, I'm ready to add a bead in the next one. Now, there are many different ways that you can add these beads. I'm going to pull just a few, just a handful of them up at a time because I don't want too many right up on my working area, right? So you can either go ahead and insert your hook into that next stitch, pull a bead up, and then pull it through and complete your stitch. That is one way to use the pre-strung method. Now the problem with that, let me pull this out, the problem with that is that the bead shows up on the wrong side of your fabric. So you will have to keep that in mind, that you're always going to be working on the wrong side of your fabric, right? That is one way that you can do it. Let's do that again. I'll show you one more time. If that is the method that you want to do, we're going to insert your hook like normal, right? Pull that bead all the way close to the fabric so that it's in between, so that when you pull your next loop up, it's encapsulating that bead in that stitch, right? And then yarn over and pull through, and your bead is on the inside of your work. Or if you're planning on flipping it anyway, then it doesn't matter and it'll be on the outside when you flip it. So this is how I prefer to do it now. After much trial and error, I have found a perfect way that works for me. So this is actually a little bit different and not exactly how you would traditionally crochet. I like to think of it, if you've ever done Tunisian crochet, I like to think of it as a purl stitch. So what I do, or similar to a purl stitch, what I do is I put all these back here and I only pull this one. I pull it up all the way to the front of my piece. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hook behind it, making sure that the bead is all the way down here as far as it can go. I'm going to insert my hook into that next stitch, just like that. And then I'm going to go like this and yarn over and pull that through while I'm holding with my fingernail, hold that bead down and pull that through. And now what you've got, finish the stitch, what you've got is a lovely little bead added to the front here with that horizontal bar in the middle of your stitch. Now I'm going to do a regular single crochet in the next stitch. Kind of keeping those beads at bay. That's why we don't pull a ton of them up at once, just a handful of them, because they're all going to hang out right here in the no man's land, right? So there's my regular single crochet. Now I'm ready to do another bead per this pattern. So I'm going to pull one bead up as high as it can go. I'm going to come from behind. I'm going to insert into that next stitch, just like that. I'm going to yarn over on top of it, and I'm going to pull it through just like this. You kind of have to pull it just a tiny bit to make sure that the bead's not loosey-goosey, and then complete your single crochet. I'm going to do this a few times with you. This is really my favorite way to do it because you're always looking at the right side. So if you're going to do a graph of beadwork, you know, if you're like a mosaic or something, you can always make sure that you're placing them exactly where you want to while you're looking at the right side of the fabric. This is my last bead. Also my last stitch. See how if I don't pull it kind of tight, this can get a little bit loose. So just make sure that before you do that final yarn over, you're making it up nice and tight. Do you remember when I said that I like to leave these really long tails? Once I get to the part where this was in the previous row, I'm going to pull that up and crochet around it. So I'm going to go around those yarn tails and into that next stitch. And I'm just kind of encapsulating those yarn tails so that they don't go anywhere. You won't be able to tell when I'm done, but I'm still single crocheting, just kind of covering up those tails. So I'm going to do this for several stitches, and then on the next row I'll do the same thing but going in the opposite direction. And then I feel much more comfortable finishing off, weaving in those ends, you know what I mean? Just making sure, especially with the beads on there, I want to make sure that they are not going anywhere at all. So that's probably enough crocheting around. So I'll pull it down here to get it out of my way again. And I'll just continue on until I get to the end of the row. Keep moving my beads down. So now I've made it all the way back around. I'm going to join to the top of my first single crochet with a slip stitch. And I'm going to chain one and turn. And now I'm ready to start adding my beads again. Now with this pattern, I am staggering my beads so that they will form a diamond shape. So then I'm going to have one here, I'll skip that one, put one here, skip that one, put one here, etc. So I'm going to start this next row with a bead. So I'm going to do a few more beads and then we will be done. So I'm going to pop one bead down. We're going to come in from behind, go into that stitch, pinch it with your thumb, grab it from the top, pull it on through, make sure it's nice and tight, and then finish your single crochet. Do a regular single crochet in the next. Pull one bead down, come from behind into that stitch, come from the top, pull it through, just like that, pull it a little bit tight, and finish your single crochet. And that is all there is to this method of adding beads to crochet. It creates such a lovely effect, such a great texture. I love the way that the light plays off of these and the sound that it makes is just gorgeous. I hope that this video showing the 3 different ways of incorporating beads into your crochet has been beneficial to you. I hope that you love it, and I hope you'll come back and crochet more with me soon. Thank you for watching.